We opened in 2010, but we are so excited. We're one of the few places in the country, states, that have a Women's Heritage Center that honors our past, our present, and our future. And you can tell our theme is up on the board, adding her story to history to tell our story. Because there's so many places and books that have left women out of history, so that's part of our aim. We have a theme each year. This year it's Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, which you'll see here. And you'll also be hearing Women of Goddard talk about the display that's in the back. And I know some of you have been looking at it. The women that are there are featured on that display. So we are so lucky to have them with us and look forward to telling us their stories.
Linda, thanks a whole lot. We're all very pleased to be here, and we're sorry that the light makes the visuals not quite as good as they would have been in a really dark room, but hopefully you can see them well enough. So we're all here to illustrate for you how exciting it can be if you get an education in science and engineering, science or engineering. There are all sorts of really, really exciting things you can do. And so we're just showing you some of those from our careers, and hopefully some of these will sort of spark your interest in just the huge variety of what you can do if you get a science and engineering education. So in my case, as Linda mentioned, I have been to the Antarctic and also to the North Pole. And so I'm going to show some of the pictures from the Antarctic first, although this particular, this cover picture is from the North Pole area. This one is the expedition team to Antarctica. If you, in a dark room, you'd be able to see that I'm the only female. I was the only female on the expedition, the only female on the ship going down, the only female on the entire island we were on. At that time, this was when I was a graduate student way back in the early 1970s. At that time, almost no females had ever gone down to Antarctica to do research, and so it was very unusual. The captain of the ship, who's actually one of the individuals on this photo, the captain of the ship was extremely upset when he found out a female was coming on his ship. He had never had a female go down to Antarctica before, and this was very upsetting to him, although after a couple of days he was very nice and quite all right with it. It was just a real shock at first. So this is on our way to Antarctica in the ship. This is as we're getting close, you start seeing some ice, and then a little more ice, and then more ice, and then you start seeing beautiful scenery along the edge of Antarctica, and then you get nothing but ice, ice and snow. It was thrilling to get to go down there. We were working on a volcanic island just off the continent itself, and so there's some volcanic ash around here, and you could also, I'm kind of walking toward where the well was because we had to collect our water whenever we wanted water for anything, drinking or anything else. We had to go collect it from the well. Every day when we went out to work, we would go out to work in this little rubber boat called a Zodiac. So we would travel in the little rubber Zodiac boat across to get to the other side because of the volcanic activity. It was felt we had to sleep on the side that was furthest away from the volcanic activity. But our research itself was actually right at the center of the volcano, and so that was very exciting. It was very steep, and you can see, well, partly you can see from this picture how steep it was. This is the, I was a graduate student, this is the leader of the expedition struggling down on this very steep volcanic slope, and what we were measuring was the ice flowing back in to the volcano. So in other words, the volcano had erupted, but there had been ice all over because it is Antarctica. So there had been ice and snow all over. The volcano erupted, got ash all over everything, but the ice went and flowed back in. So that's what we were measuring there. Because of the volcanic activity, there's a lot of heat, and the very top layer of the water was really, it was a challenge for that everybody who went down there at that time, you were challenged to, can you swim in this water? All the water was freezing cold except the very top layer was scalding hot because of the volcanic activity. So the trick was you stir it up enough so that it's bearable. And so being the only female on the island, I had to do this, you know. There was just no way that I was not going to take this challenge and swim in this water. And it was neat to get to do that. Now, for those who are close enough to see, there are thousands of penguins on this island, and here are several hundreds of the penguins on this island. Here I am right in amongst the penguins. And actually at that time, now you wouldn't be allowed to pick the penguins up, and I'm very glad that they made that rule. But at that time, way back in the early 70s, the regulations weren't there. That's like one of my favorite pictures that I took of a penguin. So that's my favorite picture that I took of a penguin. That's my favorite picture that I took of an elephant seal. So that's an elephant seal. Now we came back on a different boat, a different ship than the one we went down on. We went down on the little ship that I showed you before. We came back on a tourist ship. This is the Lindblad Explorer. That's another cool thing about being a scientist. We got free passage on this ship just by giving a few talks to the tourists. So if you become a scientist, you can do some really neat tourist type stuff, but get paid for it by giving a few talks. So that's another huge plus there of being a scientist. And here's a picture of the big Lindblad Explorer with the ice of Antarctica in the background. Now, another expedition I was on is up in the Bering Sea, which is the sea that's in between Alaska and Siberia. So that sea has a lot of ice in it, but this is before we got to the ice cover, and we sent up balloons with instruments on them to get measurements of the atmospheric conditions, and then we put buoys into the ocean, and here we're pulling one of these buoys out to get measurements that in the ocean. But the key thing we were looking for was measurements of the ice. And now, this might not be all that apparent, but there's a lot of ice in this picture, and there's also some instrumentation of taking radiation measurements on that platform. Here's the ship we were on in the Bering Sea, and if you look closely right in the left of it, there's a helicopter. And so we took the helicopter to get to the much bigger ice floes further away. And here I am at the main meteorological tower we had a little bit further away from the ship. But for most of our work, we were actually working fairly close to the ship, and we would go by a boat. We would get in the boat and be lowered down from the ship, and then go out to the smaller sea ice floes. Even a sea ice floe of that size that you see in the upper right there, you can actually walk on and not feel too worried about falling. And so I was standing on a floe about that size here, and we were about to put our buoys out. And here, we would drill a hole and then stick the buoy in it, and the buoy had a little radar transmitter at the top that we would then measure from the ship. And here I am sort of hooking up a big orange ball that would help us with the helicopter later to spot exactly where it was so we could go pick up the buoy in the end. So, and then the final trip that I'm going to tell you about is a trip that I was chief scientist on for NASA in 1999, and it was to the North Pole, but by way of Resolute Bay, which is a small Inuit community in northern Canada. This is pretty much the whole community shown there. 202 people, and no other towns or communities for like hundreds of miles. So, you know, that was the whole community. The Canadian government flies in once a month nurse and dentist in case there are any needs for medical attention. And so there's no nurse or dentist or doctor living in the community. And there's also practically no crime in the community because everybody knows everybody else. And so there's only there are 2 policemen for a gigantic area, not just this community, but the communities over hundreds of miles around. And so here's a little bit more on the community. The church is in the left there. This is the house that we stayed in for a week as we were preparing for the North Pole expedition. This is the team. Again, I was the only female. However, by this time, you could have had more females. It just turned out that the people who signed up for this trip were males, mostly, other than me. And here I am with one of the Inuits with his dog. Here we encountered a real Arctic storm. That was kind of exciting. Here we're setting up our tents in Eureka, which was another stop on the way to the North Pole. Eureka is on the island, Ellesmere Island, which is just to the west of Greenland. It's in northern Canada, 80 degrees north. Here, flying over the Arctic sea ice, and here we had to stop. We had one stop from Eureka to the North Pole to resupply the fuel. The plane was not big enough to carry both us and all the fuel, so we had to cache some fuel on a sea ice floe halfway there and then stop, pick up that fuel, dump off the empty fuel tanks, and then go the rest of the way. Here we are, having landed about 2 miles from the North Pole, and this is what we hooked up with there. We hooked up with the dog sled team, which was really cool. The North Pole there's floating ice in the North Pole. It's very different from the South Pole, whereas at the South Pole, it's ice that's on top of land. The North Pole, the ice is floating. So you can't be confident with a plane that you're going to be able to land at the North Pole. However, dog sleds are much more able to get you to the exact North Pole, which is what we wanted. So we hooked up with the dog sled team. There I am with one of the dogs. Here we are on the dog sled trip, and here we are headed to the North Pole, and we got to the exact spot, and this is me with the leader of the dog sled team at the exact spot of the North Pole. So those are expeditions that I've been on. Very, very cool to get to go on expeditions like this and take measurements that are of some scientific value. So it's one of the types of really cool things that scientists and engineers get to do. But another really cool thing that I get to do in my career is be involved with satellite imagery and satellite data. I'm the project scientist of a particular mission called the Aqua mission. Aqua spacecraft is shown on the left here, and you can see the size because you've got people at the bottom. So that was before we launched. And then the launch is showed on the right. We launched back in 2002, so we've just finished a 10-year anniversary of our launch. We've gotten all sorts of great data. It's really exciting to see a launch and to know that something you've been working on for years is successfully finally getting up into space. And so here are some images from that spacecraft. Here's one of a hurricane. This happens to be Hurricane Irene, which many of you will have remembered from a year ago. So that's satellites are so valuable to us in terms of showing us where hurricanes are and how they're tracking well before they reach land. Years ago, before satellites were available, hurricanes would strike sometimes without any forewarning at all. And we're so lucky now to have satellites that let us know that there's a hurricane out there. Another really valuable aspect is the satellites show fires really well. The U.S. Forest Service has used these images, which I'm sorry don't show up well on the with so much light, but they show fires really well, and that's really valuable for the U.S. Forest Service to determine where to deploy firefighters. They showed that oil slick from Deepwater Horizon oil spill. They show lots of global images. Here happens to be all the radiation that's going out to space from the Earth. They show things like the number of fires in a particular year, and we're of course most concerned about the fires in the U.S., but if you look at a global picture like this, you'll see that fires in the U.S. are really very infrequent compared to how many fires you get in especially the tropical rainforest areas where there are huge numbers of fires. Now here we also get to see the sea ice cover, which is what much of my work has been involved with, and original pictures tend to have lots of missing data that we then have to analyze and then get much better pictures out. This is the Arctic case, and in the Arctic in the wintertime on the left, it's way more ice than in the summertime, which is on the right. In the wintertime, the amount of ice, it covers an area about 1.5 times the area of the United States. So a whole lot of area is covered. And then we plot it up. So this goes back to 1978 up to 2010, and every year way more ice in the winter, way less ice in the summer. And so what we really want to look at is how's it changing over time. So we take that cycle out, and when we do that, that same set of data becomes this set of data, and you can see how the Arctic sea ice has been going down. That's been important in terms of looking at climate change, and the sea ice has become kind of iconic in terms of the sea ice decreases in the Arctic are one of the very strong indicators of global warming that people have become quite concerned about, and polar bears are often mentioned as one of the species that's been really hurt by the loss of the sea ice. We do have a website that we update every week, so you could get the new sea ice every week if you want. And we also look at the Antarctic just equally as much as we look at the Arctic. And this is wintertime in the Antarctic on the left, which is exactly the opposite time of year from wintertime in the northern hemisphere. So wintertime in the Antarctic is February, it's a September picture, and summertime is a February picture. In the Antarctic, the results are opposite from the Arctic in terms of the Antarctic ice has been increasing. A lot of studies are being done to try to understand why. So 2 more slides for me, and these show one other type of thing, and again, we're trying to give you a flavor of you can do really exciting things if you become a scientist or an engineer. And one of the things I've really enjoyed doing is getting to write books. Linda had mentioned that I've written several books, and I enjoy both writing them by myself, and the 2 on the left I did by myself, but I also enjoy working with other people and writing books that are either edited with other people or written with other people, and one of those is on the right. And then last slide is 3 more of my books. The one on the left was actually history of science, because I'm really interested in the history of science also. And then the one in the middle is modeling of science, and that was with colleague Warren Washington. And then the one at the bottom right, we actually have copies. We have copies for everybody here if you would like copies. We have copies both of the book, if you would like those, and also small versions of the 6 posters that Linda mentioned also. So we've got those for everybody here, and Florence and Mary and I are all both on the posters and in the book. So with that, I will now turn it over to Florence.
Okay, thank you for having me, and my name is Florence Tan, and I work at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center.
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, okay.
Project a little bit more.
Okay, I'll try and speak louder. And I'm an engineer. I built electronics for, I guess you guys have heard of the Mars rover, right? Everybody has heard, oh good. So I don't have to explain this. This is the SAM team, and I'm part of that team. And you can see us Really, it was, when we landed, we're on Mars, right? We were there starting about 9 p.m. Pacific time. And when we, I was just jumping out down on my chair. We didn't know what to, and you could see the stuff, and we knew the data that came down was going to be 14 minutes old. So we did not know whether we were safe or not. And every single time, the announcer would say, okay, parachute deploy. And there was this loud cheer. And then, we've done, the lowering, loud cheer. But we knew, in the back of my head, I knew, okay, this is done already, the data is done. We don't know whether we crashed or not, but we're done. And when I reprise the emotion, we've worked on this thing for at least 10 years. The proposal came out, so this whole thing is not just a one-time thing. It's the fact that we had a few hundred people, thousands, actually 4,000 people or so work on this mission for 6 years. And before that, there was a proposal. So there's just all this emotion that you just cannot imagine. It's like giving birth to a child, except it took 10 years. Just kind of, maybe. But anyhow, we got there, and after, we got there, and it was unbelievable because Mars is really, really hard. I mean, I will talk extemporaneously because I have slides that show that. But the Mars, most of our Martian 60% fail. From Earth to Mars, we basically not passed because of the atmosphere, because how hard it is. Now, a little bit about this rover. I talked to all these guys who were on they become mini celebrities. It's kind of interesting. The guy who talked about how it was really hard how you had the tether. He actually was invited by the president of Argentina. He's Argentinian by birth, to go meet her when he went to visit his family. I'm originally from Malaysia. I don't know if they'll invite me to the palace or not. But it's kind of neat, like we all get the little mini celebrityhood every 10 years or so. 15 minutes of fame, and I know on Facebook my friends say, oh, this person works on the Curiosity rover. It's kind of neat, but the whole thing is that if you do science and math, there's still periods, you kind of do data stuff, but you're still having a little fun because occasionally you get invited to the president's palace. Every 10 years, not bad. The other thing that's interesting about this rover landing is that the guy who was talking about the rover landing, it turns out that it is much easier to land this rover, calculation, when they simulated it, than it was to do. Remember the rovers that they had with the bouncing balls, with the big airbags? Those were much harder because you could not understand the physics. Once it comes down, it's chaos theory. You have to figure out where it's going to bounce. You don't know if it's going to bounce on a mountain or a little rock. So it turns out that it's much easier to simulate. The physics works well. They put dampeners in the. By the way, the tethers, they're made of nylon. Like your clothes string, 3 nylon, holding the. So it's kind of neat. You hear all these like little things that on the side that you don't hear when JPL is pushing out. All this public affairs stuff. But what's really neat is you talk to the people, and the guy finally told me, he said, Miguel is his name, Miguel someone. He said, we landed with style. I like that. So, we're in Mars, now what? Well, we look around, touchdown confirm, and the words were, let's see what Curiosity will take us. And this is the first picture. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of dark. It's too bad, but the picture of that mountain there is Mount Sharp, and we also have again, I'm sorry, we have 17 cameras on this rover. It's the size of a Mini Cooper, the wheelbase of a Hummer. It goes kind of slow, but it can go in an hour, 1.5 football fields. Not very fast, but still, we're not doing it fast. We have 2 years. Mission life is 2 years. 1 Martian year. Oh, who knows what 1 Martian day is called? Anyone? No. It's called a SOL, S-O-L. So, I have been working on Martian time. So, when I go to work, I'm working on a Martian day. So the Martian day is 24 hours and 35 minutes approximately. So my clock resets. 35 minutes more. I go to bed 35 minutes later, or I wake up 30 minutes, 35, it's just bizarre. So what happens is, all our windows are darkened, so that when we work in this control room, we're not affected by the sun, so that we can, actually I don't even know what time. It's funny, when you work in this kind of environment, you don't even know what day it is, you just know what sol it is. For example, I can tell you today is sol 80. We've been on Mars for 80 sols. But I cannot tell you how many days has passed. And I cannot tell you what day of the week it is, and I cannot tell you what date it is. Because you lose perspective. And so you work very, very hard, but it's really exciting, because every day some picture comes, and there's this loud cheer, because we've wiggled our wheels, we had to wiggle our wheels, we had to take pictures, and it's really neat to see this stuff, this fruition of all the work that we put in come to pass. It's really amazing. And so here they had to, the first time you come down, there's a lot of engineering, what we call commissioning tests. You do your camera, take some pictures, you move your arm up, you unfold your wheels. Actually, the wheels, all they did was wiggle, and then just to make sure that you can work every mechanism. And then you do there are 10 instruments on the rover, so you test every instrument. You do these very basic tests that you had planned for quite a few, for a year. When we launched in November 25th, 2011, from November 25th, 2011 to August 5th, 2012, we had training every month, kind of like the way you go on for a big play, theater, where you have production time. And so we had training on all the tools, on how to communicate. We had to learn to talk. Like, for example, I can't just say, hey, control room, this is Florence. I can't say that. So we all have roles. So like, for example, I'm a payload downlink lead and a payload uplink lead. So uplink, you send commands. Downlink, you get data. So you have to say, and then you have to say to the payload downlink coordinator. Now, NASA is full of TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. So it's PDC, PDL, Sam PDL speaking. That's how you talk. You get the person you want to talk to, and then you identify yourself. Then you say what you want to ask. So it's kind of interesting that way. There's a whole bunch of lingo, whole bunch of details that you have to understand. That you don't. So in the beginning it was kind of funny, because we were all like a little bit awkward. But in the beginning, towards the end, it's like PDC, PDL, and it's really fast, and nobody understands what you're talking about if you get parachuted down. So we saw lots and lots of rocks. So and pictures, and we've now taken some data with the atmospheric experiments too, and I'll show you some stuff. So the trip took over 8 months. We traveled 354 million miles. As I told you, it's really, really hard. 60% of the missions ended in failure on Mars. So we've been really good recent. We've been. If you see the red stuff, that's failure. The blue stuff is the more recent successes. And recently we've learned how to work this issue. And so it's Curiosity, picture of Curiosity. And so why are we going to Mars? Turns out we want to understand what the environment of Mars is, whether it has any potential, past, present, and maybe future habitability that we may or may see. So there's a lot of signatures of say life that you can, not even life, it's actually isotope ratios that you're actually looking for. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking at the biological potential, the geology, the geochemistry, the role of water, surface radiation, and different things that make up what we think Mars is. Mars is very interesting to scientists because of that. So I just talked about it. You can't quite see this, but I just talked about this. So again, this is can you see this? This is better, right? Yeah, this is the rover. It's pretty tall. The mast it looms over my head. Actually, I wish I put a picture of me. I was actually under the rover looking at something, and somebody took a picture. I was like a rover mechanic, so to speak. So here is a picture of the different rovers that we have. Our rover is very, very large. It's about 900 kilograms. The reason it's so big is because we have these 10 instruments. It's the most capable rover that we've taken to Mars. And Sojourner and Opportunity and Spirit, which, by the way, Opportunity and Spirit is still going on after these many years, is also part of the Pathfinder that allows us to bring this large rover to Mars. It's funny, you know, the building we operate in, we're on the 4th floor. All the Mars people on the floor, we call it the 4th floor, and then there's the 7th floor is the MER people. This is the Opportunity and Spirit people. So the MSL Curiosity rover people is here, and then the Opportunity is 7th floor. The 8th floor is the managers, and then the 6th floor is where we do our meetings and stuff. So, you know, we know which floor people are going to when you look at their badges. This is kind of neat. So the Curiosity, again, very, very, you know, very heavy. And this is me in front of the rover in Florida just before it launched. So here in Maryland, what are our roles? We contribute to one of the instruments called SAM, and it's called Surface Analysis at Mars. And I am the electrical lead for this instrument. It is the most complex instrument we've ever flown in space, ever. Because it's got, let's see, it's a suite of 3 instruments. It's a quadruple mass spectrometer, tunable laser spectrometer, and 6 GC columns. But it has these major, you know, like 72 cups that you can take samples, soil samples in, and it goes around in a carousel and goes into an oven. The oven can go up to 1100 degrees Celsius, about 1600 Fahrenheit. Very hot. Okay, so we have 2 ovens. We also have you know, we carry our own helium. The helium tanks are pressurized to about 2,000 pounds per square inch. We also have these pumps, these turbomolecular pumps, because you can't just use any pump to pump helium and all this stuff out. The pumps go up to 105,000 RPM. Now your cars go up to what, 9,000? So we have to solve pretty complex engineering problems, and it's really fun because I don't actually go to work and say, wow, let's go, you know, buy some pumps from the pump store. You know, it doesn't work. So everything has to be solved, and you make it an investigation. So the pumps have to, you know, and we, of course, when you start building something, you run into problems immediately. Oh, guess what? The ball bearings are not holding up. We have something called Brunelling. Because you can't, the other thing is that you want to pump something that you're trying to measure very sensitive stuff with. You can't just use WD-40 on the, you know, because you're going to have all kinds of biochemistry signatures. It doesn't work. So you have to research every detail, and that kind of, you know, where you don't really, you have limitations, but the limitations are such that you have to figure it out, and then it's like a puzzle. So if anyone likes puzzles, if you're an engineer, you like puzzles, it's great, because every day you're like, well, let's build this. Okay, this doesn't work. Okay, let's do this. So I never tell my guys, do this. It's more like, what if? You know that whole HP ad that says what if, and it's true. For engineering, you do what ifs, a lot of them. So, for example, to get gas coming into the SAM instrument, you have to, Mars is really cold. The Mars temperature diurnal cycle goes from like minus 100, you know, Antarctica is cold, but Mars is cold. Yes. We got a little bit on you. So it's like 105 degrees below zero to about, you know, you can go as hot as maybe 20 degrees above zero, you know, Fahrenheit. So we have to deal with such extremes every day. When you want to sample gas from Mars, if you're not, you know, and it's a lot warmer in the instrument because we have a nice little radiothermal generator, nuclear power generator to provide us power. So we are a lot warmer than, say, the atmosphere. When you come in and you take gas in, the first thing it does is, what does it do? It condenses. So we will get arteriosclerosis or, you know, heart attack, you know. Our pipes are really tiny. Our pipes are, you know, some of the pipes are the inner diameter is as small as your hair's diameter. 5/1000th of an inch, very small. So we have to heat these lines up. What do? We wrap every line with a heater. Guess what? You want to heat it up to 135 degrees C. It's going to burn up the wires that bring the electricity to heat it up. So we had to research like special wires. So what I did was, I had a baking project. You guys know baking, right? You just put the thing in the oven and you look at it over and so there's a lot of investigations like that. And so that's why it's fun. Anyhow, so this is me in front of the instrument working. Let's see, where did we land? We landed if Mars is like Earth, we landed on the equator, a little bit south of the equator. And again, the name of the place we landed is called Gale Crater. And see, this is where we're at right here. Like we use Google on it. And I wanted to show you pictures of as we were landing. This is the parachute that was snapped and captured by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and you can see our parachute. And this is the heat shield falling away from the rover as we were coming down. And again, this is kicking out the dust. You can see this is like a circle, but that was the dust that was kicked up by all the thrusters. I don't know if you can see, but there's scour marks from the landing engines, and we can see, we call it Goddard. And again, there's a tiny little dot there. You can see again, there's tracks. You can't see the tracks, but there are tracks on it's so clear that the MRO orbiter could capture it. This is the panoramic picture of Mount Sharp. Here is, again, if you have time, go to JPL's website. Some of these pictures are there, a lot of them are there. And this is the self-portrait of the camera that we take pictures with. Here's some wheels. Again, I'm sorry this is not coming out. And we started using our lasers to zap the rocks. And there are actually holes here. I don't know if you can see these, but these are the holes created by our ChemCam laser. And the ChemCam laser allows us to investigate the contents of the mineralogy on the rock. Here is a picture of our wheel. You can't quite see it. It looks like a footprint. We landed on some sand dunes. So before we've scooped about 4 scoops already of stuff, and we've analyzed it. So anyway, here is a hot summer day on Mars. It's very, very cold. And I showed you told you the temperatures. So we're going to this place called Glen Elk. I guess humans are kind of funny. We go to a place and we name it after, some place in Scotland or some place, name after, Bradbury. Ray Bradbury had died, so we named the landing site after him. So it's kind of neat that way. We go. That's why we have places like New York, right? New York, as opposed to York, England. So every day my daily schedule starts every day. When we receive the data, we get the science team together, we put the status report together, and we plan our day every day to make sure, and then we review the plan, because you don't want to send the wrong commands up and fail, right? Because this is a national asset. It's $2.5 billion. You paid for it. Thanks. So every day is like a lot. Like we look at it very carefully, and we really think about what we're going to do, and we kind of go between the scientists and the engineers and the scientists. I want to go here. I want to go here, and then it's, as the project scientist John Grotzinger said, it's like you're driving a car from here, from LA to San Francisco, but with 400 passengers, and they're all scientists, and they all want to go. Let's go there. Let's go there. No, I want to see this. I want to see that. No, and then the engineers, who's the driver, go, wait, we don't have enough fuel. Wait, that's not enough time to do this. Wait, your data downlink rates is not fast enough. So all this has to be pulled together, and we work many hours to get this to work, and it's a collaborative effort, and it's really neat because there's no politics, no anything. We're just doing it pure for the fun and the science of it. So you should all be scientists. I'm going
to show you a film from my first space flight. But what
Right on the set!
Thank you. So what happens when you're getting ready for space is it takes a long time. You know, for this particular flight, my first space flight, we had a whole bunch of different payloads we rolled through, and we were assigned as a crew for almost 3 years before we flew. Okay, so we all got to know each other really well because we had been working in a place the size of a closet before we ever flew in a spaceship. So these guys are like my brothers. We're like a big family. We still keep track of each other, and it's a lot of fun. So this is the crew, and you can start the movie.
You can only show.
Should I take the sound off? Take the sound off, yeah.
And get something out of it. There's nothing.
Can you take it off? Yeah, great. Okay, so that was Brewster. The commander's talking for this part, but I'll just talk through the whole thing. Here we are getting into the bus. You know, before you fly, you're in quarantine, mostly so you aren't around kids because kids make you sick. Okay? They have lots of germs. Sorry, guys. But so you're in quarantine, then you get in the spaceship and it lights off. These are the main engines that are lighting, and you can feel the spacecraft tip when that happens. And then those big solids light off, and it goes boom, and then you're coming off the pad, and you're sitting on your back with your feet up in the air. And then the shuttle, you're going to watch it as it clears the tower. It's going to turn. And you're going to be heads down, and you're going to fly heads down all the way to space. Okay? So, now I was a flight engineer on my first flight, so I didn't see any of this because I was so busy working, watching the numbers and stuff that I was totally oblivious of the whole ride. On my second flight, I deployed Magellan, so I was down in the middeck all by myself. I didn't have anything to do unless we needed to bail out, which luckily didn't happen. And I got to really enjoy the ride, and it's a great ride. Okay? So it all depends on what your job is. You may notice what you're doing, what's going on around you, or you may be so focused you're not noticing a thing. But it only takes 8.5 minutes. That's it. Well, 8 minutes and 10 seconds before the main engine's cut off. So I basically had trained as a flight engineer for Ascent for 3 years, and it was over in 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Which was like, you know, but all your training is to handle stuff if anything goes wrong. And basically, nothing went wrong. So when nothing goes wrong, the computers just do it, okay? And you don't have to do anything at all except make sure the computers and everything are working right. So it was a great ride. There's the big solids coming off. This was at night. Our first launch was at night. And when the solids separate from the shuttle, they separate with rockets, so you just fly through a big flame. And then you get up on orbit, the main engine shut off, and you look down at the Earth, and that's what it looks like. It's a fast ride.
Is it all quiet up there?
Yeah, there's no air outside the spaceship, so there's no sound. Okay. Now you do get sound in the spaceship, particularly when when you're moving the spacecraft and those big vernier engines fire and stuff, because they work on hydrazine, and you get a boom, big booms. But here we are setting up the spacecraft. First, you got a rocket. You're going to orbit. Then you get up on orbit, and you got your checklist, and you got to make the spaceship into an on-orbit orbiting laboratory. So you have 1,442 switches that you got to reconfigure, and you just follow your books. This is what it's like to go downstairs. There's just a hole in the floor, and you just float down. Okay? So it's great because you can just sort of move around. Now you got to be careful that you don't stall out. You got to learn how to move around if there's no gravity, because if you're stuck in the middle of the room here, if you didn't push off from the walls or the ceiling or the floor enough that you stalled out, you'd have to call one of your friends to come get you. Very embarrassing. You don't want to do that. Okay? So you have to learn to push off. So it's sort of like swimming, but there isn't any water, so you can't push, right? So on my first flight, we had 3 spacecrafts that we were deploying. These were commercial spacecraft. This was before the Challenger accident, so we were launching commercial spacecraft, and they're spin stabilized, and then you just release them off a big spring and they pop out. You hang around till the solar arrays deploy, and then you pull away. So when that big rocket fires to take the spacecraft, the satellite, up to orbit, if it blows up, you aren't close enough that you're in trouble. So the spinning top part, see the big round ball on the bottom with a nozzle? That's the rocket that's going to take it to the right place from where you let go of it. So we're monitoring the spacecraft, making sure that it's in good shape. This was an RCA spacecraft, this particular one. And you just drop them off where they need to go to get to the right orbit for what it needs to be. When you're up on orbit, flying in a spacecraft, things are a little different because it's orbital mechanics now. It's not like it is down there. So if you want to go faster, you have to hit the brakes, because if you hit the brakes, you go into a lower orbit, which speeds you up. So the whole thing about orbital mechanics is very counterintuitive when you're up there. Okay? So Woody and Jerry, we had 5 guys in the crew, Woody and Jerry, and 2 payload specialists. Charlie Walker was working this big experiment. He was developing a drug called erythropoietin, which we couldn't get pure enough here on the planet, so we took it up to space, because without gravity you don't have convective mixing, so you can get things that are really pure. Okay, so that's what he was working on the whole time, and here he is working on this experiment, and he just worked away down the middeck on the experiment for all 7 days. Then we had Rodolfo Neri-Vela, and he was from University of Mexico, and he was doing all sorts of experiments on behalf of Mexican scientists and engineers, and he was an electrical engineer just like you, Florence. So he flew in space with a spaceship. So, and he was working really hard, and his experiments were just all over the place. He had stuff to do for everybody. So he was doing biology, chemistry, physics. I mean, he was running the gamut. Here the guy's getting ready for, there's Rodolfo. He's getting ready to section a plant. Here he's an electrical engineer, but now he's a biologist. So, sectioning his plant. And Woody and Jerry had 2 spacewalks that they were going to do. We were doing experiments to see the best way to build space station. This was back in 1985, so we were trying to decide the best way to build space station. And we worked with various engineers around. There I am looking out the window. I was an environmental engineer. I was absolutely amazed at how fragile a planet looked. What really bothered me in between my 2 space flights, which was 1985 to 1989, when I looked out the window, it looked like things were getting worse. We were really doing major changes to the surface of the planet in a very short period of time. It really concerned me, since I'm an environmental engineer, so that's why I moved back up to Goddard and started working on environmental spacecraft again. So things can happen to you in your career where you're going to go make major changes in what you do just based on what happens because of your jobs. But here's Woody and Jerry. Oh, here's everybody. We had Thanksgiving dinner up on orbit. We were up for Thanksgiving. So it was really fun. You can hardly see Jerry, but he's sitting on the roof. Jerry Ross was absolutely adamant that this was going to be his only chance to sit on the roof for Thanksgiving dinner. So he did. He sat up on the ceiling the whole time. But you don't go to space for the food. It's just, all dehydrated camping food. Rehydrated. You have your choice between hot water or cold water, which is disinfected with iodine, so it doesn't taste great. Okay? So, but we did have, ocean spray cranberry sauce, just like I do at home, so that was okay. And we found that tortillas, because we had Rodolfo on board, we flew tortillas instead of bread, and we found out that tortillas are actually much better to make sandwiches in space, because you can roll them all 4 sides up, and so the guts of the sandwich doesn't go flying out. That was our impromptu experiment. Here's Woody and Jerry getting ready to do their spacewalks, the 2 of them to do the space station experiments. And we had one from MIT. Zakia went to MIT, so she's probably not going to like what I have to say about the MIT experiment, because it didn't work that well. We had another one from Langley, and that worked a little better. But I mean, the one that didn't work from MIT, it wasn't supposed to work great, because it was a time motion study. So it's actually, they had to make it so parts of it worked really well, and they had to run it all the way up to the part where it didn't work so well in order to get the data that they needed to fill in their numbers. So I was just teasing. This is looking out of the back of the spaceship with the guys out on the payload bay. My job during this part of the flight was to operate the robotic arm, the big arm on the shuttle. And here they are building a truss. If you look at this truss, this is a truss from Langley. It actually looks like the trusses in the space station that we have right now, because this experiment worked really well. It was called Access, and we were able to hit the timeline, in fact, even do better than expected.
Brewster, the commander, was working the cameras, and I was operating the arm. And I had Woody and Jerry on the end of the arm using it like a cherry picker. And because the arm has only 6 degrees of freedom in it, it will come to mathematical solutions where you don't know where it's going to go. So if you're an operator of the arm and you have guys on the end of it, you have to be real careful it doesn't take off in an unexpected way and squash them. So Woody and Jerry were being very nice to me throughout the entire training. You know. And I was, of course, very gracious back saying, yeah, you guys, I'm a woman driver, watch out. So there's Jerry on the end of the arm. He got up on the end of the arm and he wanted me to twist him around so he couldn't see the spacecraft and see what it was like to be all alone in space. So he got up there, and the first thing he did was he shot his arm straight out and started humming the Superman theme. So we had to work through day and night because you're going around the Earth every hour and a half. So you have a sunrise, sunset every 45 minutes. Really? Pretty neat, but you have to manage your sun and dark cycles when you're working outside. Here's Woody on the end of the arm routing a little cord around the top to sort of see what it would be like to route electrical wire through these trusses and stuff. So we had all sorts of little side experiments we were doing once we got the truss set up. And there I am operating the arm. The arm is really fun to fly. It has 6 degrees of freedom. So in your right hand you got roll, pitch, and yaw. And then your left hand's forward, back, up, down, left, right. Okay, so you put those two together, and you can really, maneuver it around incredibly well once you get used to flying it that way. And we were picking up the trusses and moving them around. There was about 400 pounds, and the guys were just moving them without any problem. You don't want to get too much momentum up. We had trained in case they got too much momentum up to pull a spacecraft away, and then we'd figure out what we were going to do if we had a bad day, but it worked out really well. So here's the MIT experiment called EASE, and we found out that EASE wasn't so easy, but then it wasn't supposed to be. And it was done by a professor that was at MIT, but now he's at University of Maryland, and he's the same professor that has the big water tank that does the research for how you operate in space. Because a lot of times we'll work underwater trying to get ready, because that's the closest, neutral buoyancy is the closest to 0G that we have for trying to train. So if you see Woody and Jerry working on this, during this experiment, their hands got really tired because you got a pressure suit on. It has 4.2 pounds per square inch of pressure, and you're working your hands against a pressure suit, so your hands get really tired. And you can see there's Jerry up on the top. The way you tell your friends apart when you're working out in a spacesuit, one guy always has red stripes on his legs, and the other guy doesn't. And so that's how you know which one's Jerry and which one's Woody, okay, just by the red stripes. So that's why if you see a spacesuit, sometimes they got red stripes, sometimes they don't, and it's just our way to be able to differentiate so you know who you're dealing with. And that's been a tradition for human spaceflight for a very long time. So even if you look at the Apollo pictures, they have that same mechanism for telling each other apart. So if you watch Jerry, who's up on the top, it's sort of hard to see, but if you look at the left-hand portion of the screen, Jerry's going to come around, and you're going to see, and I want you to watch his feet, if you can sort of barely see him. And you're going to watch him see his feet. Watch his feet. He's putting the thing together. Now watch his feet. See what he's doing? You see him kick his feet? Yeah. Now, would that do him any good in space? No. There's nothing up there to kick against. But we train in a pool. So the whole time he was up there, if he was having trouble getting stabilized, he used to cheat in the swimming pool by kicking his feet, and he was kicking up there, but it wasn't helping him out. So here's Woody again, and now he's turning EASE around, and this one was a little more difficult to manipulate because it had sort of a difficult center of gravity to manage, but it still was not hard for him to manipulate, and that was part of the experiment. And the only real problem we had through the entire flight was right here where we brought EASE back down, and there was a pin you had to put through it to reattach it to the spacecraft, and the pin wouldn't go through very easily. But luckily Jerry was down at the bottom. Jerry grew up in a farm in the Midwest, and he's a strong guy. So he just finally brute forced the pin through, and it worked. So Otherwise, we were trying to figure out how to dispose of it. You know, we had an experiment looking at thunderstorms from space. And if you look at the excitations you're going to see from lightning up there, well, you can barely see it, but we could see colors from the top of the thunderstorms, reds and blues. So we were recording that so that there would be some documentation, because you can't see those colors when you see them from underneath, but you can if you're all the way over them looking down. So we were able to see that from the spacecraft. Reds and blues, it's amazing. This is what it's like looking at the Earth. You're going across the Sinai Peninsula. We were just holding cameras up in the windows. Film cameras, we flew these great big canisters of film. We just have a little thumbnail drive now, so.
Yeah.
But again, this is just what it's like if you were just looking out of the spacecraft, looking down at the Earth. This is coming across the Atlantic Ocean. You're going towards the east, okay? Because we go easterly. We want to have the Cape to the east, so we're over the ocean in case we blow up. We rain down on the ocean instead of on people. So, and here we are getting ready to come back home. This is Charlie and Rodolfo down on the middeck. There's a physicist here. Yes, this is plasma. So when you're in physics class, you're going to learn about this theoretical thing the physicists talk about called plasma. But if you're in a spacecraft, it's a really real thing, because you're seeing it out your windows when you come back in through the upper atmosphere. And you're totally enveloped in this plasma, so that's what it looks like with the plasma coming over the upper window of the spacecraft. And you can see a little plasma right on the bottom of this. And when you're coming back in for re-entry, you turn the spacecraft in big S turns, so no one part of the bottom of the spacecraft gets too hot. We don't burn off the coating. We have these really tiles that with liners in between. So you just roll a spacecraft like this, so you keep the heating even. But first, it's over the east coast of China. You flip the spacecraft around, you burn to slow down, then you flip the nose, then you just glide all the way across the Pacific Ocean. We landed in Edwards Air Force Base, and this is what it's like looking out the window, side window, when you're coming over the coast of California. And what you can see were clouds, and that sort of, it was cloudy. When we burned, it wasn't cloudy. We weren't supposed to land through clouds, but sometimes there's Oxnard, that looks pretty good, but sometimes the weather doesn't always cooperate, because it takes you a while to get back in. So we actually came through a cloud, but here we are in final. Came through the cloud, and we were right where we were supposed to be, which was really good, because you don't have any engines, so you're just gliding. But you take a big turn when you're coming in, and that way you can make a smaller circle if you're too low, or a larger circle if you're too high. So that's why we do a great big, it's called going around the hack. You do a great big circle coming in, and then you just straighten out. And you don't drop the landing gear until right before you're going to land, because you don't want that much drag. Okay? And we've been up for 7 days. Brewster, who is the commander, is landing the spacecraft. What amazed me was, here we are dropping the gear. I dropped the gear, and I expected that we would, really touch down hard, because you're in this flying brick. Well, Brewster, I could hear the wheels going on the runway out at Eddy before I could feel any pressure in the seat. And I sit in a commercial airliner and sometimes feel like my teeth are going to get knocked out of my head. And I go, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? I've been flying with guys that can make a flying brick into an absolutely soft landing. So what's wrong with these guys? But anyway, so looking out the side window of the spaceship when we're coming into Edwards, that's what it looks like. So you can see how fast we're going as you get. Now that was derotation. Now the nose is down, so you can see the speed will pick up. So that's just looking out the side window and how fast everything's going by. To give you an idea, as compared to when you're in a regular airplane, you're going a little bit faster, and it takes you a little bit longer to slow down because of that. So during this period, we were always landing out at Edwards because we needed the extra runway space in case we had anything we didn't expect. So they started landing in Florida after that. So here we are. getting ready to get out. Now you have your 1,442 switches you have to reconfigure before you can get out. So that's why they sit there for so long. You're in there, and here we are walking out. And we've been up for 7 days. We felt really good. But at that point in time, you haven't had a shower for 7 days. So the first thing you want to do is hit the shower when you get back to the crew quarters. And that shower feels really good. That's it.